Hello, everybody. This is Operator Juno, and tonight we are doing something a little different. I decided, why the hell not? Let's make a little tier list. And what better tier list than one of my favorite series of, well, my life, which is the Resident Evil series. Now, this is every game that is up to 2023. Now, there are certain games I did not play, and that's why there's that category. I'll base my ranking on S, which is a genuine classic, a game that really deserves the spot that it's in. A is really, really good that I genuinely enjoyed. B is all right. There could be some improvements, but it's, still a playable game. C is definitely mid. It's a Resident Evil game, but there's much better things to actually fucking play. D is just straight garbage. Don't play it, please. Find yourself something better to do. And then didn't play is, well, pretty obvious. Didn't play. So, to start, we're starting with a controversial one. Code Veronica X. Now, Code Veronica is one of the most interesting iterations of Resident Evil. It's the first major jump to the 3D era, and it's got Steve. You don't know who Steve is. Steve is what I can basically describe as a genuine piece of shit, a pervert, and someone who, oh my god, he's a walking, talking meme. Nobody likes Steve, and it's also one of the most awkwardly designed Resident Evils that I've ever seen. It's not exactly bad, but it's rough. It's really rough. So for that, I'm gonna put that in C tier. I know it may have done some of the things for the story, but fuck you, I don't care. This is my list. Next is the Dark Side Chronicles. This is basically a sequel to a rail shooter that explores a little bit into Leon's background as a government agent with Agent Krauser as well. However, it's a rail shooter. It's it's rough. It's rough, but it's not a bad game. Again, I'm probably gonna put it with Code Veronica there, but it definitely takes the spot above Code Veronica because why the hell not? Now, the original Resident Evil 4, 2005, that's an easy S tier. That game is a legitimate classic. It's got all the good fucking bangers of stupid fucking villain lines. It's got great gameplay, a lot of replayability, some really good, I say good DLC. The game with fucking things were in the game before they even released. And it's had more iterations than the fucking Apple books. Or not Apple books, but like MacBooks, whatever. It's one of the best games, and you can get it for pretty cheap on most any system nowadays. So why the hell wouldn't you? So next is the 3D Mercenaries. I didn't play that. That's easy. Oh god, Operation Raccoon City. Ugh. So Operation Raccoon City was you played as the Umbrella, like Secret Service during the Raccoon City incident, and it's almost like an alternate retelling of the Raccoon City stories. It's pretty fucking terrible. It was meant to be more of a squad shooter, a like soft reboot of the Outbreak series, but it performed very fucking terribly. I seriously would not recommend it. If you get it for free, it's more of a meme just to fucking play it. But if you want like any legitimate story out of it, don't play it. So that's definitely in the D tier list. Here we go. Resident Evil 7. This is gonna go into A tier for me. So this was the game that, so from 1 to 3, it was the standard survival horror. 4 to 6 was the action-oriented era of Resident Evil. And a lot of people after 6 had lost faith in Resident Evil as a franchise because nobody thought it could pick itself up after the shit show that 6 was. And then Resident Evil 7 came out, and that changed everything. 7 was a step back into a new perspective, which was first person perspective, And it also managed to revitalize the horror aspect in a more grounded setting. It was really, really good, and it's still really, really good. I highly recommend it. You can go into it pretty much blind. You don't even have to play through the first 6 games, and you can enjoy it as it is. So that's the beauty of it. So that's definitely A. It's not perfect. It does have its flaws. That's why it's not an S tier. I mean, granted, it's fucking Resident Evil 4 has its flaws, but Resident Evil 7 is definitely up in the A tier. Resident Evil Revelations. Revelations was originally on the Nintendo 3DS. It was more of almost like a side story for Jill Valentine. You know, because Capcom doesn't want to fucking give her a game past 5. But they are doing an animated movie, which I think is fucking bizarre. But Revelations is also very arcadey in its sense. It's not a bad game per se. It does, you know, expand more on the Jill-Chris relationship and all that. But it's, hey, if you want to have some fun, why the hell not? And so I'm going to put that up in B tier for me. So yeah, everything's kind of like right now down the middle. Resident Evil 4, the 23 remake. That one I'm going to put in A tier. So I'm going to have to make a video on the whole parallel timelines of Resident Evil. It's a really good game. I put in like 70 hours at this point. And yes, I am releasing the Resident Evil 4 remake review. I promise. Don't fucking, no, please don't leave. It's got a lot going for it because it also shows that they're more than willing to take a look back at their old IPs, make it a little more grounded, have a little more fun with it. And they also expanded a lot on the combat system. Now I'm kind of like half and half on the parry system, and especially the shooting mechanics. That's definitely going to be talked about in the review. But overall, in terms of a remake, it's one of the most faithful ones I've ever seen. So absolutely, I recommend picking that up. Never played Survivor, but I've seen the memes. They're great. Resident Evil Village. So Village, that is Resident Evil 8. It's very clever, I know. It's kind of a bad game, to be honest. Because Village has a very soft plot. It wants to be Resident Evil 4, but it's not Resident Evil 4. And with that, it tries to mimic a lot of it, like beat for beat. And it doesn't really hit it on the same spot. Plus the whole mold aspect that expands upon it. That, and it retcons some of the story, which also falls into the whole parallel timeline with Resident Evil that makes me want to lose my fucking mind. But by itself, it's still a decent game that's pretty playable, that you also got Mercenaries mode for it that's pretty fun. And you do have a story that, you know, kind of did bring a tear to my eye. And it also finishes one of, you know, Ethan Winters' story from there. So I'm going to put it, it's not going to be, I'm going to put it in C tier for me. So that's where I'm putting Village. And again, it's definitely above Code Veronica. Code Veronica's on the low end for C tier for me. I know, hate me, whatever. Now this one I'm excited for. Resident Evil Outbreak File 2. So this is a crime against humanity that Capcom hasn't touched the Outbreak series since the PlayStation era, because it was the first Resident Evil games that had online co-op through the PlayStation, which I didn't know was a thing back then. But the servers are still, not the PlayStation servers, but the PC ports, people are still playing Outbreak to this day because they fucking love the game. I love Outbreak. It's a fun rendition where you play as a handful of characters that goes through the Raccoon City incident. File 1 and File 2, they're kind of the same game, but File 2 has almost it's a different story than File 1. And I prefer File 2 over 1 because it's a lot better in my opinion. So for that, I'm definitely putting that in S tier for Outbreak. Now, I've never played Gaiden, which is, I guess, first-person Resident Evil, before it became really popular with 7. Re:Verse, I have not played, but it's kind of a piece of shit, so I don't know, we're gonna leave that there. Ooh, Oh, here we go. The original, the one who started it all, the original Resident Evil in 1996. It is a fucking meme that exists nowadays. If you don't believe me, Grimbeard has been making a lot of shorts with AI voices of the original cast and characters, and they're fucking comedy gold. Which, even without those, the game itself is just, it's what started it all. And back in the old PlayStation era, like the original PlayStation, it was fucking terrifying. It was my very first dip into Resident Evil, where I played as Chris, shot my entire handgun at a single zombie, and then turned the console off because I was like, me. It was fucking terrifying. But overall, I mean, gameplay mechanic-wise, the remastered version does everything better. So, but to, kind of give it some credit, we're going to put it in B tier because that makes sense to me. Now, speaking of Resident Evil, the original, now remastered, we're going to put that right up in S tier because it takes everything that was, imagined in the original 96 and re-released in 2002 on the GameCube with, updated graphics, presentation, voice acting, and a brand new area, some modified puzzles. It's perfect in the essential sense. If Capcom, for whatever reason, decides to remake the original Resident Evil, it will not compare because the 2002 remastered basically replaced the 96 version. It's that much better and it's that good. Everybody considers that the canon game, and it basically is. Now, Resident Evil Outbreak. So, like I barely gushed over Outbreak File 2, Outbreak was the original, which followed, it's the same set of characters, it's the same kind of idea, it's just a different plot, so to speak. You're going through area, you have different characters, limited inventory, and you have to solve puzzles under pressure. It's a really, really fun game that I highly recommend playing because it's one of those few that you don't really get to play. And if you ever get a chance to play the Outbreak games, I'd highly recommend it. So I'm going to put that in A tier for me. Actually, no, we'll move that down to B tier because, like I said, I prefer File 2 much better. Now here we go. Resident Evil 2, the 98 version. Now, this also, compared to the original 96, like with its counterpart, so going from 1 to 2, it improves so much. Voice acting, new characters, a new setting, more enemies, more action. It was so much better, and it's a great fucking game with so much replayability that, hell, the 2 remake doesn't even compare. So we're going to put that into A tier for me. It's not S tier, but it definitely has its moments. Resident Evil 6. Oh boy. So this is where the shit show really, really kicks off for me. So Resident Evil 6, it's not really a Resident Evil game. It's a poorly excused third-person shooter with very, very minor horror elements that happens to be called Resident Evil. This was the game that a lot of fans thought the Resident Evil franchise would die on, and I don't blame them because I was one of them. I thought it's a good game with a friend. It definitely is a great game with a friend, but in terms of like Resident Evil, it's terrible. I would not even recommend it if you can avoid it. But, if you've got a weekend or two to kill, and you have a friend who's willing to suffer along with you, it's definitely worth the fun. But in terms of just overall Resident Evil games, it's at the bottom of the fucking barrel. Never played that. I did play the Umbrella Chronicles. So like with the Dark Side Chronicles, the Umbrella Chronicles was the first iteration of the rail shooter. Now, I did play a lot of this, when I had a Wii. Fuck, I forgot the Wii existed. And it wasn't bad, but again, it's a rail shooter. So we're going to put that kind of at the C tier for me. If you like Resident Evil, it's kind of a fun little nod at it, but don't go in there expecting, actual story and plot. Now, here we go. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. So, this was the third game in the Resident Evil trilogy that this is basically a spin-off game turned into a finale trilogy for the Raccoon City story, which featured Jill Valentine again, a character from 1, and Nemesis, who in this game definitely earned his title and was a complete fucking terror house who chased you, who pursued you, and did not stop even till the end of the game. You had to use a fucking railgun to stop him. And no, not the one that Jill carries in the remake version. Yeah, I have fucking problems with that game. If you get a chance to play the original Resident Evil 3, absolutely play it. It is so fucking fun and it, like with 2, it has a lot of replayability with the live action system, which is basically like almost like a quick choice system that you're presented with, that you have to make a choice right then and there, and you have a very limited time to do so. So it does play some variety into it, some different weapon placements, enemy variety. That's definitely S tier for me. So putting that up there, it's a great game. Now, never played Dead Aim, but like with Gaiden, I've seen the fucking memes. They're bizarre. Resident Evil 0. So, 0 is the quote-unquote prequel to the 2002 remastered of Resident Evil. That follows Rebecca with a new character who you never see again, which is Billy. Now, with that, it did have an interesting mechanic where you technically have 2 characters at the same time in the same area. And you had almost like a flash system where you could interchangeably switch between them, and you could separate them throughout the entire map, and they can kind of do their own thing, separate inventories. The only bizarre thing is that Rebecca was the only one who could actually mix herbs. Well, Billy had the mask, but again, it's fucking Billy. But in terms of like the actual villain and the whole plot, it doesn't make sense, and it kind of retcons a lot of the story, because if you play Resident Evil 2002 before 0, Rebecca seems like, a scared fucking girl, like one would be, and then you play 0, and she's fighting all of these different horrors, including hunters, before the mansion incident, and is terrified and isn't the fucking powerhouse that they make her out to be. So that's why I kind of don't like it, but it's still, a relatively faithful like RE game. It still has a lot of the same mechanics, but just like overall, it's kind of at the bottom of the barrel for C tier, even above fucking Code Veronica for me, or below Code Veronica. Resistance. Oh god, fucking Resistance. So Resistance it's almost like a cat and mouse game. You have one player who's facing off, so it's a 1v4 game, but one player has access to all, like, almost like a game master who's trying to stop the people, like the prisoners, from escaping, and you can spawn like monsters, you can take direct control of them, and it's the fucking mastermind or game master or whatever, it's called mastermind. They're kind of fucking overpowered, from what I understand, and it's just, it's kind of fucking bad. Like, if you have a few friends, it might be okay, but like overall, it's just, yeah. I'm gonna put that at the bottom of the fucking tier list for me. Resident Evil 2 Remake. Now, this one I was so fucking excited for, and it did not disappoint. I had a lot of fun with it. However, compared to the 1998 version, it does not compare, because the whole like story system was kind of fucked up, but I did like the renditions of the characters, and especially Mr. X. Holy shit, Mr. X was fucking terrifying, especially if you didn't know how to handle him. I mean, now that I play it, he's really easy to get around, but going back then, it was just, it's a really good game. So I'm definitely putting that up there in like A tier for me. Never played Umbrella Corps, but it is fucking terrible from everybody I've ever talked to who's played it. Now, this one's kind of going to be a controversial choice from me, which Resident Evil 5 was kind of the like, that's when the Resident Evil series started showing cracks initially before 6, where, okay, a lot of it doesn't make sense. You're still using tank controls. You're running off, you know, a poorly optimized AI partner. Holy shit. If you don't play RE5 with a friend, it is so fucking difficult and irritating. But playing it, obviously playing anything with friends makes anything better. But just playing it naturally, it's a struggle. It's also the very last canonical appearance of Jill Valentine before this animated movie, which, what the fuck, Capcom? Why don't you use my beautiful blonde babe, Jill Valentine? Why don't you, Capcom? Why aren't you answering the fucking door? I'm in your walls. Anyway, for that, I'm gonna put that up in B tier for me. So it's kind of in the middle of the road. It's not A tier, it's not great, but it's not like kind of bad. It's in the middle for me because it's, at the end of the day, it's still kind of a fun, decent game for me. Now, one that's not a fun, decent game for me was Resident Evil 3, the remade version. Because out of 2, 3, and 4, this one is the black fucking sheep nobody likes to talk about. Because in my review, I mentioned that it takes about less than 2 hours to complete. You can complete it in less than an hour. That's how fucking quick it is. And Nemesis is such a beta bitch in this game. Jill Valentine's kind of like a bitchy version of it. Carlos was great. I loved Carlos. And no puzzles, the whole lack of, you know, explorability, playability. I got the game back in like April 3rd. I completed it and platinumed it in 3 days, including all the collectibles. After that, I uninstalled it because I'm like, there's no fucking point. I've done everything I could. There's no mercenaries, no jackal mode, nothing. So for me, it's definitely at the bottom of the list. For the initial time that I played it, it was fun, but it's really not anymore. Revelations 2 is an interesting twist on the Revelations series. So you technically have 2 storylines, plus, you know, a bunch of extra DLC ones I never played. But the ones that I did play, the main story, it brings back Claire, who, you know, I think she's not bad, but it's definitely the more cardboard version of Claire, where you have one storyline that happens and then one that happens like, I think a year later or something. I don't remember the exact time, where you play as Barry, of all fucking people. And Barry, I don't think, has been a playable character ever in these games. So it was kind of nice to fucking see him, and he's got quite the arsenal. And then whoever, you know, Claire and Barry, those were the gun characters. They could actually use firearms. The other character had kind of a unique quirk that couldn't use firearms, but could help the other player. So that's why I kind of rank it down there. It does have a satisfying conclusion, to some extent, at least a good ending does. But that's just me personally. It could be a lot better. I just feel that in terms of it, I'm going to put it kind of like at the low end of B tier for me. So that'll be, you know, where I set Revelations 2. But overall, this is kind of where I rank the Resident Evil series as a whole. I definitely have some hot takes that a lot of people don't agree with. That's okay. We're all allowed to have some opinions to it, even if your opinion is wrong. And I just kind of wanted to do something to kind of kill some time in between. But I am definitely working on my reviews. I promise I'm not kind of making filler content. Plus, I've also been, you know, busy doing other things like vacation. That was great, by the way. But I've got more content to come, including 2 more playthroughs, which are pretty short for me. Well, one's actually very, very long, a lot of dead air, and the other one is an interesting one. But I'll give you a hint. They both take place in the jungle. Meanwhile, thank you so very much for watching. Have a good one, lads.
We know you're a cop.
Yeah, of course I am.
So you admit it.
Hate to break it to you, but we're all cops.
You take that back right now, Jill.
Think about it for 1 second, Wesker. Think about how we just ran into someone's residence and started blasting. Think about all the dogs we killed.
Oh God, she's right, isn't she?
No.
I have to go. I have to go reassess my life.
Jill. I'm scared.